And I thought to myself, this could be the first time that somebody understands me.
Do I work on this thing that is super important for work, or do I clean my dining room table? They're equally important in my brain right now.
No wonder I'm so stressed out. I actually think I can do 100 tasks in 20 minutes. And the reality is I can do 5 in 5 hours. You look at someone and on the face of it, you think, wow, how are they doing that? And the reality is I'm barely hanging on.
Hello, everyone. I have just come off an interview that I am so excited to share with you because it is packed full of really interesting strategies that I think you're going to take away from. So I've been talking to Lisa Ballard. She's based in Park City, USA. And she leads as a director on Google Cloud's Global Strategic Initiatives team. She's also one of my clients, probably one of my oldest clients. We've worked together through both my babies, and we have a few funny stories to share about when we met as well. But Lisa has over 20 years of enterprise technology sales experience. She specializes in strategic problem solving, selling, and execution with the Fortune 100. And she's got some very interesting stories about those high pressure moments as well. Prior to Google, she also led strategic transformation for Amazon Web Services, for Aptio, and for CA. And she's done business in over 25 countries. When she's not closing these deals, she also has a family with 3 kids, 2 large dogs. She loves being a soccer and dance mom, practicing yoga and Pilates, hiking, skiing, and walking. And we'll talk about walking a little bit as well. But yeah, like I said, she's been a client of mine for a number of years now. I've been so happy to work with Lisa. She's been an amazing, amazing person, and her development with her ADHD, which you'll hear about today on this podcast, has also been amazing. So I'm excited for you to get into it.
Thanks so much for inviting me. I'm very honored to have this conversation and nervous, but very excited. It's like hanging out with your teacher, you know?
Yeah, it does have that vibe. But it's great to talk to you about this because I think your journey has been so interesting. And, there's actually a lot of people on my team who are excited to hear this because you've met some of them you haven't. So I'm really, really excited to go through this. But yeah, you, like so many women with ADHD, you received a late diagnosis. Can you take me through what that experience was like for you?
Yeah, definitely. So a few years ago, we were evaluating and researching ADHD and dyslexia for our children who were starting to kind of struggle. And, we were seeing things at school. And one day I was on a long walk listening to a book called Scattered by Gabor Mate. And I kind of stopped, just had like a feeling like I got hit by a bolt of lightning. And I stopped and I paused the book and I thought to myself, this could be the first time that somebody understands me. And it was a very emotional moment for me. I had never kind of listened or heard something that resonated so deeply with how I saw myself. I just kind of thought I was different. I thought I was a little bit strange. I thought I was a little bit dumb. I can remember that moment as if it was yesterday. It was so powerful. Before that moment, like a lot of other people, I just kind of thought ADHD was like a way that kids were labeled who were a little hyper or who maybe had a hard time focusing. I didn't realize it was like a neurological wiring. I didn't realize it was a thing. And so I will tell you, at that time, I kind of felt like everything changed and nothing changed all at the same time. It's a very strange experience, but it's been a really amazing journey.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have had that experience. A lot of people have been in that place where I know the same thing happened to me, where you learn so much, maybe even about ADHD for your kids or for your university, and then you are in this position of going, oh, no, actually, this is for adults as well, and explaining kind of how that works. So it's interesting to hear your perspective on it. What was the sort of steps that you took then? Did you go to your doctor? How did that work? Because I know that's complicated and different for everybody.
Well, I kind of started to devour podcasts and everywhere I could learn. And the more I learned and listened, actually, the more I felt like I was part of a community. So that kind of started to feel good. But yeah, I had a therapist. I immediately started talking to her about it. I then saw in the US, we kind of have these different doctors that you see in a certain
Mm-hmm.
order. So I saw my general doctor, and then I started seeing a psychiatrist, and
Mm-hmm.
then we went on a bit of a medication journey. And yeah, it's still a journey, right? I'm still learning and
Yeah.
taking turns and twists and researching and learning. But I will say it brought me to you, which is the biggest because we'll talk about that, I'm sure, as we go on. But I
Yeah.
heard you on a podcast. And as you know, I had to put you down in New Zealand and beg you to
Yeah.
work.
And for you, like, I know for a lot of people, it can be really intimidating to share an ADHD diagnosis for so many reasons. Maybe people will take you seriously. Maybe people won't take you seriously. Like, there's so many different ways people can take it. So how did you manage that? Was that something that felt natural to you? Was that a slow process?
It was a slow process. I'll give you a couple stories, one personal kind of family, and then one
Mm,
professional. One story, I was struggling with my younger sister on a few things. And I was also
mm,
feeling this sense of like guilt and understanding about why she would be frustrated with me over the years, with maybe like saying, "Hey, I'll be there at 2 and showing up at 2:30," or the different things.
mhm,
And I remember talking to my therapist about it and saying, "Look, but I'm trying to explain to her I'm ADHD and like I'm learning and she won't listen to me." And she looked at me and
mhm,
said, "That's going to happen to you with a lot of people because
mhm,
you're changing, but you're going to have to take some time to help them see what you're going through and understand really
mhm.
what ADHD is, because you could pick out any of your friends and most of them would not know the level and have the same level of understanding now that you do. So you have to be
Yeah.
careful how you now bring this newfound thing into your world." And then professionally, I was worried.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, great. Now I have something that I can actually call all the things I do. And it's the things that happen to be, there's a lot of it that I'm insecure. And of course, immediately you think about the bad stuff, right? There's a lot of good.
Yeah.
And so it's taken me some time. And now I'm much more confident and I'm much more open about I'm not following this. And this is why I need to do these three
Mhm.
things to make sure, right, that I can do what we're talking about. It's just the way
Yeah.
I'm wired. Sometimes I'll say ADHD and sometimes I say, we're just wired differently. This is how I function,
Mhm.
because we function this way, right? And so
Yeah.
kind of how I manage that at work. But it has come up many times. Google is very good about neurodiversity as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. And you're right. We'll talk about the strategies more, but I think just that concept of like, this is the way I'm wired is so powerful because sometimes you don't feel like getting into exactly why you're wired this way and the details of it, but you are different. And so being able to share that, it's great. And it gives people the opportunity to share how they're wired, even if they're not ADHD as well. They're like, well, I'm wired this way. And it's like, okay, cool. We'll work together rather than just assuming everyone is wired the same, which is cool. Speaking of your time with Google, you have a very interesting job and we are going to talk about it. But I really want to know, looking back when you found out you have ADHD, did you look at your industry and what you were doing and sort of feel like it made sense of what you're doing now?
Yeah. And I have a funny story. So as I was kind of preparing some thoughts for this conversation, like
Mm-hmm.
anybody with ADHD, naturally, I had to Google symptoms of ADHD to remind myself what all my problems are.
Yeah.
and, uh, and then, of course, I had to get some popcorn and turn on some good music and get a little pump of dopamine. Because I started thinking about this question. And look, I knew then what I know now, which is I've got to be challenged. It's got to be kind of
Mm-hmm.
exciting, deadlines, competitiveness, all of
Mm-hmm.
it. I'm very driven and very ambitious, but those things kind of are very important to help me
Mm-hmm.
continue to function, and
Mm-hmm.
be interested in what I'm doing. Looking back, it makes a ton of sense because if you look at what I do today and it's deadline driven, right? And it's very binary. It's very, hey, you've kind of achieved this or you haven't. A lot of people can see it. It makes a ton of sense because there's kind of this dopamine wave that you ride
Yeah.
when you're closing deals, right? So yeah, it makes a lot of sense now.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of pressure, a lot of like, you have to be in the moment performance pressure and a lot of project based pressure. And I remember I was talking to another member of our podcast who was saying that it's almost like with ADHD, we want to be on the edge of everything. We want to be kind of at the sort of that space. And so, yeah, when you're closing a deal, and we'll talk about this more later, it's like you're at that edge of something new.
That resonates deeply.
Yeah.
Deeply. Yes.
Once you were diagnosed, what was it that made you think that you needed additional ADHD strategy support? Because it can be a process getting the diagnosis and then being like, okay, this isn't everything. Like I have a diagnosis now, but it's not like I've unlocked something just with that information 100%.
Yeah. You feel like you unlock something. And then when you look in, you're like, wait, but nothing's changing. That's what I meant. Like everything changed and nothing changed.
Yeah.
One thing that continues to be probably the guiding principle with the work that you and I do together, and you hear me say this a lot, is almost my worry that I'm not living an intentional life.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it was, I want to make sure I'm not missing things. Like I find with ADHD, it's very easy to be reactive. It's very hard to be proactive. And to live an intentional life, you have to live in a state where you're balancing that and you're proactive at times and maybe more times. And I knew I needed help with that because for some reason I was struggling. And as you always say, with ADHD, easy things are hard and hard things are easy. And I use this mantra a lot, by the way, with my family, my kids. But, I wanted to improve matters of the heart as much as I did my professional career. And I knew I couldn't do it alone. And so I did hear you on the podcast, and that's how we connected. And that was super, super important because I needed that support and need that support today. This isn't like, if all of us know, right, in this community, this isn't like you have this and then you're cured. This is the way we are. And we should be proud of that, but it's hard. It's really hard. And so we do need support. And whether it's reading a book or being able to have like an amazing coach and community, like that's what I needed. My working memory, it's a real problem. And I didn't realize that. I just kind of was dumb. And now I realize I'm not dumb. I'm actually, it's just not clicking sometimes. And I need something to like bring it back. Prioritization, it was impossible. I mean, I remember sitting in my office, my home office, staring at my dining room out the door. And all this stuff stacked up there. I'm sure I was in the middle of another remodel. And, our family celebrates Christmas. And we had a Christmas tree standing there that wasn't decorated. And, and it was the end of the fiscal year. And I'm getting another proposal to try to close a deal that had to be closed. All the things are happening. I was absolutely paralyzed sitting there. I did not know, should I clean my dining room table, shower, or write the proposal? And my brain would not function. I needed help, right? So that's kind of where I've reached out to you. And of course, now we spend a lot of time on these strategies.
Yeah. And I love hearing that story. It's so interesting because some of these pieces, obviously we've talked about, some of them we haven't. And that's such an understandable space where you're like, do I work on this thing that is super important for work, or do I clean my dining room table? They're equally important in my brain right now. And I don't even know which one is the first one to do because, I've got kids, I've got family, and they need me. And it can be really, really, really tough. So I'm excited to get into this piece.
Yeah, it's hard. Definitely hard. I don't know about everybody else, but I call my ADHD rebel Lisa because I feel like as you know, you've heard me say, I'm constantly in this battle with like, it's hard work, right?
Yes.
You have to do the work. And we know, and especially because I'm my most vulnerable with you, that sometimes Rebel Lisa wins. And it's really off.
Yeah. It's interesting because we've been working together for so long that some of the conversations that we've had have sparked things that I now say to other clients as well. And which I don't know if you know that, but it's, that idea of negotiating with your inner teenager has come out of that. And I've spoken to a lot of people about like, hey, it's your inner teenager. And so you want to you don't want to be like, you can't go out, because as we know, that doesn't necessarily work out well. Your inner teenager is going to sneak out a window and do what they want. But, it's about taking that minute to negotiate and going, okay, so you don't want to do this at all ever. Can we what if we did this? What if we started with that? And it is really interesting. From September 23rd, I'm going to be working with 10 professionals who've received a late diagnosis of ADHD and are currently feeling consistently overwhelmed. Over those 6 weeks, I'm going to be helping you to build a system for a better, focused, balanced day. If you'd like to be included, all you have to do is just click the link below and email me interested and I'll send you all the details. And I know some people are going to have questions, so I've actually asked Sarah to ask some of them right now.
Yeah, so when do I need to reach out?
So you have to reach out anytime before the 23rd of September.
Can I just show up to this thing, or do I need to have some knowledge of ADHD?
That's a great question. You don't need to have any knowledge of ADHD. You just need to know that you are feeling overwhelmed. We have built a system over the past 3.5 years that's going to take you from overwhelmed to focused. So no worries if you've never done it before.
If I wanted to get a little preview, do you have some material that you can link?
100%. So if you message me interested, I'll send you a document that details everything. It's going to answer all your questions, and it's also going to have some links and some screenshots of the previous amazing things that our current cohort of Focus Balance Days members are already doing in there.
That sounds great. Interested?
My first question going into this is where you were, paralyzed, dining room table, proposal, Christmas, those kinds of things, to where you are now. Like, what is that feeling shift been?
Oh, it's pretty dramatic, actually. And it's a journey, right? It's still like sometimes I remind myself of that moment. And I've had a few of those, but that one was very defining to remind myself how far I've come. Because sometimes now I'm like, I can't believe I'm still struggling with blah, 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 right? But it has been hard. It's been rewarding. And we have a lot of strategies I think, we'll talk about. And I look at that moment as like, keep going forward, right? Because I will always say to myself, like, there's so much going on. Can you change something right now? Nope. Great. Then what are you going to do about it, right? So that you don't feel and live in this state of like overwhelm and almost like depression at times and anxiety. All of this stuff causes so much anxiety, which then bleeds into your family and it bleeds into your work. You're trying to be calm and you're trying to, kind of be in what I would call self. And it's hard, really kind of working with that rebel Lisa. And what's funny is the teenager thing you just said, going back to that for a minute. I now have a teenager. She's daughter Ayla, and she's brilliant and smart and clever. She has, right, some of these tendencies. And I think if I were to tell her, no, you can't do this, or whatever, what do you think she's going to do? She's going to want to do it. If I say to her, hey, I got you your favorite chocolate, let's sit down and pour a cup of tea and talk about it. She's like, oh, did you say chocolate? So like I employ that same tactic with my inner Lisa, which is, okay, you can have some chocolate and you can stay on board, but we still kind of have to do this task,
Yeah.
But yeah, that journey from then till now and to where we're going together is, it's an evolution.
Yeah, definitely. So, we talk about these strategies at work and at home, and I'm really curious, what are your kind of, if you were to pick a few go-to strategies to help you manage at work and at home, what would you say that they are?
Yeah, I have a couple of go-tos for sure that are my favorites, but I'm going to tell a story about you really fast. So when Skye and I, a few years back, started working together on one of our very first meetings, Skye said, I think you should buy a planner pad. And I was thinking to myself, is she talking about like a planner you write things down in and then what? And I was thinking, I know she knows I work at Google. Like a planner pad. I thought it was so funny. But anyway, I never told you. But so I went and bought this planner pad because in Skye we trust. And so I bought the planner pad. And here's the brilliance of this planner pad, which is a very simple book. But you literally dump everything in your head, like all your actions and your to-dos and the things that are mucking up your brain, causing anxiety. And then you just have a list. And then you funnel it down to a day. And then you have to funnel it down to a time. And I know this because ADHD, I think I can do more than humanly possible in a very short amount of time until the planner pad shows me exactly the hours in a day. And then I look at the tasks and realize, no wonder I'm so stressed out. I actually think I can do 100 tasks in 20 minutes. And the reality is I can do 5 in 5 hours. And so that simple planner pad, I do this consistently, not all the time, but consistently, especially when I'm like really kind of starting to wind myself up, forces me to prioritize down to the hour. And then I employ another strategy, our red zone strategy, or really kind of a tackling overwhelm strategy, which is what has to be done today? What will go up in flames if not done today?
Yeah.
And that is how I'm able to get down to that hour, remove things, and then put them in other places. But the planner pad is where it starts because I just have to start with kind of a blank piece of paper.
Yeah, that's so funny. And it's interesting because I'll tell you another story from that. All the stories are coming out today, which is that I was very, very aware that you worked at Google because I was like, oh my gosh, like, this was very early in my coaching career at the time. And I was like, yeah, I'm just going to show up the same way I show up for every single other person. Like, I'm not going to planner pads aware. And so with you, especially because, I got the feeling that it was like that tactile. And we've talked about this a lot. We use different ways of working. And with ADHD, we don't always like think in the same way. It was quite, evident that like thinking on paper was important. So planner pad it was.
It still is.
Yeah, exactly.
It's time to order it. It's September. But there's another one. There's a couple more strategies I'd love to talk about because I think they're super helpful for me. I learned them from you, and I hope, maybe they'll help other people. But the step-in routine you brought to me really early on, because I remember saying, sometimes I just can't push through the wall, right? The wall of no, right? I can't push through it. And you're like, well, let's create like 3 or 4 things in a step-in routine that create some dopamine, right? And so for me, I don't know why, and I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of judgment, but 80s music like triggers something. Going outside and taking a deep breath, jumping up and down, getting, a drink, some popcorn. I have a few things I do. And then it just kind of, the most important thing after I have my little dopamine is that I just go. And so it might just be a blank document on my screen. It might be a blank piece of paper. It might just be opening the book. But the minute I do that, I think to myself, just go, and I pen to paper, and then it just starts to open up. I've asked a few times, like, what should I do for my kids? And you've said, well, do what you do for yourself. And the step-in routine has really, really changed the way that we interact with our children when they're having a hard time in homework or soccer or dance or whatever, doing like a practice or something they need to be doing. And instead of getting frustrated and just do it, it's a little bit more like, hey, here's a few things you could do. Let's turn on your favorite song. Oh, great.
Yeah.
You can just see the energy change. So they now have these step-in routines, which have also then, we have something new that you and I kind of put together recently, and I kicked off last weekend, which I'm proud to report.
Oh, nice.
Is the family planning strategy. And in that, we create checklists for the kids where at night they have their checklist where they kind of have the 5 things. I mean, it needs to be even the simple stuff, brush your teeth, whatever, read for 20 minutes. But the family planning strategy is more about on a Sunday or a Saturday for our family, whatever works, bringing the family together. There's 5 of us and saying, what does our week ahead look like? And how do we plan for that? What are our chores? When can we get together as a family? And actually having them part of that. But I took your advice and I put out the best chocolate. You can tell we like chocolate. I had drinks. I had music going. And even though I was a little stressed, I said, we are going to make this very fun, everybody. And so we all laughed.
Gritted teeth.
It was a lot of gritted teeth in the beginning, but once we started to realize the process was happening and Liam, my middle child, was sending his calendar invites, just so you know.
Oh, that's so wonderful.
It was very successful. So these routines and these strategies, for me, I can't emphasize enough how much they decrease stress and anxiety and improve my life and everyone's life around me, and there's a couple of others to highlight that work for me and might work for you, which is the action tracker, Skye, that you built and helped me put together. It's so simple, but as we all know, I kind of take notes everywhere. I might take a very important note from a meeting on the back of literally the back of a napkin or an envelope. And I might, over here and think that's the best strategy for the day. And then I might have a whiteboard. But actually, the action tracker is a place for me to kind of look quickly, put it all in the spot, right? And then a template. So I can just quickly, it's already categorized. It's easy for me to step into. So that's a big one.
For those who are curious about what the action tracker is, it's a Google Doc. And I work with a number of clients who use this, but I always say, I've seen some pretty big deals get closed using a Google Doc. And, your Google Doc, your action tracker has been so helpful. But it's a Google Doc with reoccurring tasks because the most important thing about it is it's that simplicity of being able to come back to it every day. And, saying, okay, they've got one space where all of my tasks go. That's where I'm prioritizing. That's where things are happening, because it makes things so easy. And it is so easy to try and write on a whiteboard, write on a napkin, write on, you even get those stories, somebody came up with an idea and all they had was lipstick. So they wrote in lipstick, and it's sort of almost like romantic. But in real life, you're just like, where is the thing? Like, now the problem is not just that I can't remember the task. I can't remember where I wrote the previous task down. So it's just this endless working memory problem.
Yep. It's scary. Yeah, the action tracker also, because it's a template and it's recurring, we just have the categories up there. So let's say with work, it might be the certain customers or partnerships I'm working on. At home, I have everyone's name listed. And just that triggers me straight into and I can start adding to it and working from it. But I use it and rely on it every day, and have introduced it to other teams that I work with at Google to help us track really complicated deals in a very simple way, or steps in a deal in a very simple way, especially when you have language barriers, when you have different things going on. Everyone can kind of centralize in one spot, and it's they all like it. Like, oh, I just have to do this. I'm like, that's it. That's all we need.
I don't have to just monitor the chat and I'll find every single task as it comes through the chat. Yeah, no, exactly. My question for you as well is, what do you do? Because I think we all have those moments, we have these strategies, but then things get hectic. We call them the red zone. You get into the red zone. Everything is just kind of coming at you. And maybe you've dropped a couple of the balls. Like, what do you do in those moments to recenter yourself?
I start with usually a feeling of panic. And then I look to see when my meeting with you is coming. And then I think, oh my God, we have got to, it's happening. Like, I'm kind of spiraling. I am literally in survival mode. We can get into some stories, and we probably will, where you get a sense for the intensity, and everyone goes through this, right? So this should apply, is applicable to anyone's life, but it is that feeling of, oh God, I've just spiraled. I've spiraled out of, I have all my great strategies, and now I'm off. I will say, usually the first thing that I do is I go to my planner pad.
Yeah.
And I just start writing, and I just start dumping things down. And then that kind of starts to bring me back on track. And then I usually hop to my action tracker. So it's between those two things now. And I do just start listing. And then I go back to that kind of tackling overwhelm strategy where, is it happening now? Does it have to happen now? Is it going to be on fire if I don't do it now, sort of thing? And in the red zone, I will say you have to be really kind to yourself in that moment.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to be the best version of yourself across all these different dimensions in your life. And you're going to have to just take what's an absolute priority. And if it means that I'm trying to get a proposal out the door by noon on a Saturday and my daughter's nutcracker starts at 1, I'm not missing nutcracker, right? So you have to really, really kind of everything else drops. And those are the two things you're going to do. And that's it.
Yeah. And I can attest, I've seen your calendar. There has been proposal nutcracker, on the calendar.
Oh, yes. Happens sometimes.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what you do essentially, because it's a really interesting job. And I think it's something that everybody can relate to. Even if they don't have the same job, they can relate to kind of that pressure that you can be under. So can you explain in a few seconds, what is it that you do?
Yes, I could. I usually start by saying, oh, I'm in sales. And then that doesn't really help. So yes, so I do work at Google, and I lead global complex deals and partnerships. So it's not just always negotiating, kind of a deal and a deal structure and figuring out. They're usually kind of unique sort of partnerships where we're trying to do something together with a customer. And we're either trying to create new paths to revenue, or we're building something that's never been done before in the market, and for Google, as you can imagine, that's got to be fairly bleeding edge because Google's a pretty innovative, right, tech company. So my job is to kind of figure out how to go from an idea kind of at an executive level to execution of that idea, right, to an outcome that can be measured in a certain time frame.
Sometimes across countries and time zones and lots of people.
Lots and lots and lots of people. So yeah, in my job's, a complicated puzzle, and there's a lot of people with a lot of important input that participate in these teams. And like right now, there's one that's worldwide. The European, Japan, and U.S. regions, are all kind of working together, and I'm, leading kind of the global orchestration of what this partnership could be, and it's pretty complicated.
Yeah, and you've walked into some pretty high pressure situations, or maybe now you've zoomed into some pretty high pressure situations. Are there any stories you're able to share with us?
Yeah, there's a lot of stories. There's a story that might kind of help people. I don't know, but it was a hard time. It was kind of going back to that moment when I talked about when I was paralyzed. That was actually a different time, about a year before this happened, but we're negotiating with a pretty big deal with a company in Europe. And I was the lead negotiator, and I was negotiating with a guy who is the lead negotiator for mergers and acquisitions in capital markets. So we had very different background. He knew nothing about the cloud business, and I was trying to learn a little bit about M&A as we go. And we had to try to figure out a way to connect. We had two CEOs who were quite eager to see this come to fruition, and a huge amount of complexity. So we started to approach the end of the year. And in these deals that we work on, they're usually gated by a time. They're usually time bound. Some of them aren't, just depends on, but for the most part, they're time bound. And this was an end of year. Very important that we executed this contract by the end of the year. And by the end of the year, I mean end of December. So as I'm rapidly approaching the end of the year, you can imagine, again, we celebrate Christmas. So Santa Claus has to kind of like get organized, right? I host a holiday party for my extended family, and there's a lot that goes into that, right? And then there's holiday parties, and there's nutcrackers, and there's dance, and there's ski school, and there is a mega deal that has to be closed, all kind of at the exact same time. So I'm flying back and forth between the US and Europe. It's mid-December, and the deal stalls, and everybody is melting down at work. It's very intense negotiation from the deal. And we get it back on track. And basically, we can't get over some terms. And so we're kind of going back and forth. And as you can imagine, the input's coming. There must be 100 people involved, and I'm leading it. So in the end, you'll all be happy to know I'm still gainfully employed and closed that deal on time. But when we think about the red zone, and that was when you were helping me.
Yeah, I remember that.
Really helping me because I was in crisis mode. This stuff is hard. You look at someone, and on the face of it, you think, wow, how are they doing that? And the reality is I'm barely hanging on.
They're like, how am I doing this?
And I remember closing the deal, and the next day was the family party where I had 40 people at my house. And at one point, I kind of dozed off asleep. Finally, I don't know what point in the party it was. And my brother put a blanket over me and was like, time to go, everybody. I think that was it. And then Santa Claus came, and everyone was happy.
Yeah, definitely. Gosh. And so, when you're in these high pressure situations, especially when you get that email or you're in the conversation with somebody and somebody says something and you think, oh, shoot, how do you show up in those high pressure moments where it can be so easy, I think, to just kind of go off into your head, and it can be a struggle to perform at the level that you're trying? Yeah.
Look, the most important thing is, even in the highest moments of stress, is to connect with somebody. So you get an email, you don't agree, there's politics flying around, you're trying to appease multiple people. And you kind of have to try to just continue to connect at the most basic human level. Are you okay? Can I help you? How do I help you get from A to B? In the world that I work in, even though it is definitely a for-profit business, we are in service, right? We are in service to our customers. And so if you want to be in these sort of jobs, you have to kind of think of it as a problem-solving opportunity. And how do you help somebody successfully go from point A to point B among all the complexity and variables they're dealing with? If you can help that person be successful, then you can be successful. And even when you're fighting it out, and the last person you want to hear from is that person you're negotiating with because your head blew off your shoulders last time you spoke to them, kind of have to dig deep and find that place of connection. And you have to prepare and prepare again. I write it all down. I observe what we said. I think it through. I talk to everybody. I take a huge amount of input, right? And I kind of feel it down, decide what I need to keep, what I don't. I trust my instincts. And then in those moments, you kind of show up and you're your authentic self. And in any situation, showing up as your authentic self is going to help a lot.
Yeah. I really like that. It's actually similar to what I do in the mornings now. I've started saying, right before I get on the first call of the day, my intention is to help. And having that kind of a baseline to just remind yourself what this is about for you. I think that is so powerful, like you say, to kind of like, you almost just feel your shoulders drop, that moment where you're just like, okay, I'm just a person talking to a person trying to help, trying to solve the situation. And you let all of those other things go, even just for a bit.
Yeah. And worst case, you just try to look at it all like it's a video game.
Yeah. God, this level is hard.
Yeah. How did I get here?
Yeah, that's so great. So we've talked a little bit about the struggles of ADHD and the strategies, but how would you consider your ADHD a strength in this role?
Oh, yes. I think it's a superpower in this role. I really do. I think, again, kind of my ability to look across many different things, distill it very quickly into something that, I can do something with or somebody can do something with, to context switch as fast as we go, right? Which is a lot of context switching, and be able to kind of effectively multitask, right? I know there's a lot of arguments that that's not possible, but there is a wiring that says I can be thinking about that big thing over there while I'm doing these three things over here, and know that these three things I'm going to somehow tie to that thing. I also think, I am dyslexic as well. So some of that kind of comes into play here, but I think being able to be very comfortable and confident in working in abstract situations in the gray.
Yeah.
It's hard for a lot of people, right? It's funny because my job is kind of like about a binary outcome. Did you win or did you lose? But there's a whole lot of gray to get to that answer. And I do think there's something about ADHD and the way that I am wired that actually puts me in a very strong position to function in this kind of abstract place where, and once I'm in the abstract and I have a vision, which I usually get a lot faster than other people in terms of a path to a deal or something we're working on, then I can execute. And I slowly bring people along with my madness until they start to, the fog starts to clear and they start to see it too,
Yeah, they go, in Lisa we trust, we're going in this direction. Yeah, but Lisa knows, Lisa can see the end. And that you're totally right. That's such a strength of ADHD.
Yeah, look, ADHD is like our biggest strength and our biggest kryptonite, right? It's crazy in the same scenario. It's like two sides of a pancake. I mean, that's what it is, right?
Well, it's true. I mean, you said before when we talk about the idea that hard things are easy and easy things are hard, and we always focus on the easy things are hard, but also the hard things are easy is still in that sentence as well.
Oh yeah, I see it in my son, in sometimes the way he thinks. And I follow him and people say, wow, how did he get to that? Like, that thought process. And he's 11. I'm like, oh, he's been doing it since he was born. And he can connect these abstract thoughts in a way that it makes sense to him that there's a bigger thing happening. But it's fascinating to just kind of watch it now,
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And so if you were listening, somebody listening and they're thinking, oh, like that sounds really cool. I didn't know that like this high level sales process and all those things, I didn't even know this was an option. That sounds amazing. What advice would you give to anybody who's thinking about taking on a similar role?
Well, first of all, talk to your doctor. No, I'm just joking. I would say, look, I see a lot of people in my business with ADHD traits. I don't know if they are ADHD diagnosed, but I do see a lot of traits. And again, I do think it's a superpower. But where I see people struggle is when they don't have the strategies and they don't have the tools, right, to kind of help them channel their ambitions and how to do this job in a way where they can be concise and where they can be clear and where they can execute well. There's a lot of stress that comes with this job. But, it's funny. I've been reading this book, as you know, called The Checklist Manifesto. And it's written by this surgeon. So he gives a lot of really great story, a really good storyteller. And you're like, I never thought reading about his surgery and the depth that he gives would be so entertaining. But what's interesting is, right, like, think about that high stress that they're in, and then people build buildings, like the building can't fall down. Like those are stressful situations. But if you create checklists for yourself, you create these tools for yourself, right? It can help you reduce your stress and just focus on what matters most so that you can do the job, but you got to have tools, and you have to, no matter what job, no matter if you have ADHD or not, connect at that human level. Do you care? Are you connected? What does this person need? How can you service this thing? So I think those are really important if you want to jump into this world.
Definitely. I think those are great. I was just laughing because I read the Checklist Manifesto because you said you were reading it. And I was like, I don't know if those surgery stories were that amazing. I'm a bit more squeamish than you, clearly. I was like, Lisa, why are there so many of those stories? But yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's that human level, and it's about why you want to show up. And also there is a bit of the dopamine. Those jobs with high dopamine in moments can be really, really fun if you have ADHD. The key is to just make sure it's not all the time, and that the admin that goes with it is not overwhelming.
Yeah. There's one more thing I will say, because I think it's super important. And I've heard this on your podcast with other people as well, which is it's important to surround yourself with people who are neurotypical and people who complement your skill set. A story I have to tell is there's a gal that I work with still at Google who is unbelievable at her job. And she has taught me so much. She also made me cry the first couple of days I started, but she knows that now and we laugh about it and we're very close. And she says a lot of times she's neurotypical. She was a managing consultant. She's brilliant in the way that she puts things together. I can call her and, just kind of like, blah, all this stuff. And she's already put it into a structure to make, help me kind of move it forward. She says, Lisa, I'm like the whirlpool. I just collect and listen to you and kind of think through and, structure, and you're a lightning bolt. And I just need you to hit in the middle of the whirlpool sometimes. and I would say, find your people. Find your people who see you, who get you, who you see, who you get, and who you can come together and kind of a 1 + 1 = 3. In any job, that's just so important.
I think that's really amazing advice. And I think it's interesting as well because, when I give this advice to people, it's always this idea of, finding people who are going to compliment you, who are going to be that, like, gathering all of your information and putting it somewhere, but who are also happy for you to work the way you work, who value the thing that you bring as much as you value what they bring, who aren't constantly just like, why are you not being a whirlpool? And so it's that combination is where the magic happens. That's so cool. Well, we have a few lab questions that we ask everyone. So I'm going to ask you now. So tell me about the, one professional achievement that you're proud of most.
It's funny. I had to really think about this, but when I was evaluating the opportunity to go to Amazon Web Services, I was really scared. I was at the time a regional vice president of strategic accounts for a company called Aptio. And I loved that team. I was there for a very long time. I loved my customers, the leadership, the CEO, the CRO, all wonderful. And I didn't want to leave. But my old boss and mentor called and said, this is kind of a unique opportunity, right? We're going to go and work on these very strategic pursuits that are never been done before. At the time, AWS, which is, Amazon's cloud business, the CEO at the time was, needed a team that could just cut through everything and make sure we didn't, things didn't slip through the cracks that were important to him and to defining our business. It was a stretch. But what scared me the most was, this was as I was learning a little bit about ADHD, but what scared me the most was that I was afraid I was not going to be able to push through the wall of no. I was afraid that when Rebel Lisa jumped into into me, I was going to lose battles and I was going to fail. What if I couldn't do the tasks? It wasn't about my ability. It wasn't about the stretch, because I knew I could, work with Scott and he would coach me through certain things. It was, can I win the battle with myself for the things that we've talked about? At the time, I didn't know it was ADHD. I didn't have the strategies. I was scared, and I did a lot of therapy and a lot of meditation and a lot of writing and told myself, just go for it. And if worst case, like go back and, run a team or something like that in sales.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it. And I faced a very big fear. And I do think that a lot of people can relate because it's not necessarily the job itself. It's not, can you close $1 billion deal? It's, can you do the work within inside yourself to show up and do what has to be done? Can you fight that battle to do the thing that has to be done?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm proud of it. I did it, and it got me to Google. And the last kind of 5 years has been an incredible career experience. It changed the trajectory of my career, and I'm super grateful.
Yeah. No, and you've done amazingly well. So definitely. On the other side, though, because we always want to have balance, is there a professional failure that embarrasses you, and how did you deal with it?
So many. Last year, 2023, I had the opportunity to lead a very complicated deal for kind of Google Cloud, but also all of Google. And I worked with some amazingly brilliant people. I had experience and exposure to the top of all of Google's leaders. And we ran a pretty solid sales cycle, if you will, for this particular opportunity. There's a lot to this story, but I will never forget the call when an executive at Google, who is very close to the very top of Google, called and said, "Lisa, you're losing. You're losing this." Oof. And it was just the two of us, and and I'm sitting there quiet. And the executive that I was working with and I had a call coming up in an hour, and they were trying to intersect it so that it didn't surprise that particular executive, because that would not have gone well. And so they got to this other executive, to me, to kind of intercept this situation. And this is a person you don't really want to hear. This is a kind of a technology luminary in our business who's very important and influential, who called me and said, "You're losing." And I said, "Yeah, that's really just unfortunate." And so I went quiet and I said, "Great, I've got to go. But I'll ping you questions as I go. I got to figure this out. We have a call in 1 hour." And so we scrambled as fast as we could. And the leadership team came together on what our strategy would be to see if there was a chance to turn it around still. And we got on the call ready to talk through our talking points with this customer. And they told us that we lost. And I remember hanging up the phone and just sitting there by myself in my office. And the tears just kind of started to come, but there was I felt a little numb, and it was just kind of coming. And I thought, the entire leadership team knows I was leading this. Now, look, my ego's big, but I keep it in check. So I don't think they really were like, "Oh, this is all our fault," because this was everybody. But it was hard. It was very, very hard. And I just sat there, and I immediately thought, I have my health, I have my children, everyone's good, we're good. Because everything else was crying. And I will say, one thing I love about Google is people do care about each other. And the top executive called me and said, "Are you okay?" And I thought, wow, I guess I'm not going to lose my job. So that's good. I
feel a bit better now. Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah, no, I'm going to go have dinner with my family." Yeah. And so he said, "Yeah, I understand." So I went up to dinner with my kids and asked them about their day. And we do what are your rose? What are your thorns for the day? And my son said, "Mom, what's your thorn for the day?" And I said, "Oh, I lost that deal." And he said, "What? How come you let that happen?"
Oh.
And I said, "I really don't know." And I said, "But it was hard. And what I learned is that I can do hard things, right? And what I learned is that the process sometimes matters more than the outcome." And so I kind of faked it through dinner, pretended I really meant all of that. And then I proceeded to I think, cry for the next 2 days. And I still out there. I still have to talk about it. Lessons learned, all the stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. But I really appreciate you sharing that story, because I think it could be so easy to be like, "Oh yes, your life, an unmitigated series of successes." And it's like, no, there are deals lost as well as deals gained. And this is the process as well.
Yeah. When you're in this role, it's pretty binary.
Yeah. It's not always.
It's not like second place, stick knives. That's not it.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, my other question just to transfer it into something a little bit lighter is, what is, and I think we've talked about this a little bit today already, but what is your favorite dopamine activity? What do you do when you need to like get back on those calls, when you need to do that task?
I walk. Walking is probably, for me, there's so many, health benefits, mental health benefits, all of it, but it's also, you can clear your mind, and even if I have a call in 15 minutes, right? And I just I will go out and walk out and back as fast as I can, or I'll take a call walking. My boss, who's wonderful, she and I take all of our one-to-ones on a walk. We literally joke around that we like solve all the world's problems walking together. But I hike, I walk, I like to move. That's where I find a lot of, dopamine. I like to hang out with my dogs, and late at night when I can't necessarily go for a walk because it's dark, we live in the mountains, I turn on music. Sometimes I dance by myself. I pretend like I'm a dog. It's really horrible, but it's fun.
Who among us hasn't done that?
Yeah, come on, right? It's like sometimes I'm like, 80s rock drummer, and that's what I do to like pull some dopamine in.
Yeah, that's awesome. And if you had an ADHD life motto, what do you think it would be?
Well, I think it is be intentional, be mindful, and no regrets. I think that I really think time is the most precious resource. It's all we have. And so, it's up to us to use it well.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for coming on here, for sharing your story. It's always amazing to hear stories of people who've been through so much on their journey, who've learned so much and have so much to share. So thank you so much for sharing everything with us today.
Oh, well, thank you again for inviting me. And thank you for, I get to plug you because you're my coach, but thank you for letting me be and showing up as vulnerable. I am more vulnerable with you than I am my own therapist, because I have to tell you, like, I didn't follow my calendar yesterday and I'm really embarrassed about it. And you never judge ever. You just help. And I learn something from you every week. And it really has shaped my life. And I wouldn't be able to do the things I'm doing today. And I'd probably be in an insane asylum if I didn't have you and your staff, everyone so wonderful that I get to work with, that's so supportive. But you investing the time and the research and into people and in this community it's a gift for all of us, and it's life-changing. And I'm just really grateful for you.
Oh, well, thank you. I really, really appreciate that. That's so lovely. Well, if people want to follow you, you're not necessarily a public figure, but if people want to see what you're up to, is there a way that they can do that?
I'm on LinkedIn, and I think if you search my name, Lisa Ballard, and you put Google, I'll pop up. And you can always just, DM me, and happy to help wherever I can.
Awesome. That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Lisa, and sharing all of those strategies. I think this is going to be an amazing episode. So I'm really excited to have that one out.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening, everyone. And a big thank you to Adam for making us sound great and Anastasia for making us look great. We couldn't do it without you.
And if you're looking for any of the references to the papers that we discussed, head on over to our show notes page, because I always bring the receipts.
Plus, if you want to find out more about us or any more deep diving into what we're doing, you can find us on Substack. That's where the community is. That's where we're chatting. And you can see all of the fun and exciting things that we are bringing to the table.
Thanks for being here.